and House District Number 34, Bill Seitz.
Earlier that if you prefer to use the word affirm in place of swear, you raise your right hand and repeat after me. Please. I state your full name. Do solemnly swear. To support the Constitution of the United States. And the Constitution of Ohio. To honestly, fairly, and diligently. Perform all the duties required of me. As a member of the Ohio House of Representatives. During the 124th session. I will do this to the best of my ability and understanding. So help me God. Congratulations.
The chair recognizes Representative Seitz.
Mr. Speaker, my House colleagues, today is a proud day for economic development and for better relationships among Ohio's cities, townships, and counties. Senate Bill 5 heralds a new day of a more level playing field in respect of one of our perennially more contentious issues, annexation. The bill enjoyed wide bipartisan support both in the Senate and in the House Local Government Committee. And I am particularly proud to say that the conscientious diplomacy of our Speaker, of Chairperson Roman, of Representative Coates, Flowers, Wolpert, Stapleton, Safara, and others has made this even a more equitable bill than when it came over from the Senate. If you have followed the torturous history of annexation reform as long as I have, you would be as amazed as I am that this bill enjoys supports from groups that have traditionally been diametrically opposed to one another on this question. The County Commissioners Association of Ohio, the Ohio Township Association, the Ohio Farm Bureau, the Ohio Home Builders, and even the Central Ohio Home Builders are all supporting this bill. The Ohio Realtors had concerns about this bill, and I'm pleased to report that this afternoon I was told that those concerns have been addressed in this bill. Our state needs regional cooperation, and Mayor Representative Safara is right about that. Townships have historically been reluctant to participate in these regional efforts out of fear because current annexation law leaves them at the complete mercy of their municipal neighbors. This bill corrects many of those inequities. It clarifies who has standing to appeal. It provides for an equitable reparations schedule. It provides for an expedited annexation process for 100% owner petitions that offer a good chance of real-time economic development, and that's a benefit for cities. Mr. Speaker, I certainly appreciate the good work of the Local Government and Township Committee and all of my colleagues. I urge you please to support this bill, and we will have taken a great step forward in resolving one of the most difficult issues that our legislature has faced. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Question is, shall the bill pass? The chair recognizes Representative Seitz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise this afternoon in support of House Bill 126. This received the unanimous support from the Criminal Justice Committee of our House. This is a bill that will modernize and update Ohio's antitrust laws, known as the Valentine Act. Those laws, like their counterparts at the federal level and in other states, prohibit price fixing, bid rigging, monopolies, and restraints of trade. Ohio's Valentine Act was passed in 1898, only 8 years after the first federal antitrust law. It has been little amended since 1898, although Congress and the houses in other states have repeatedly updated their laws. This bill does two things. First, it adds a 4-year statute of limitations for criminal and civil actions brought by the Attorney General or county prosecutors. In 1994, we put in a 4-year statute of limitations for all private plaintiffs under the Valentine Act, but there was no prescribed statute of limitations for government actions. I believe that government should live by the same procedural rules of fairness as we require other Ohio citizens to live by. Therefore, the bill adds a 4-year statute of limitations, which is the very same 4-year statute of limitations prescribed by federal law and by the law of most of the other states. Indeed, as of now, Ohio is the only state in the country that has no statute of limitations for government antitrust cases. Therefore, the bill conforms Ohio's antitrust law to that of the federal counterpart. Second, Ohio antitrust law now allows injured parties double damages. Federal antitrust law, however, and the laws of most other states allow treble damages to those people that are injured by price fixing and bid rigging and similar offenses. At the Attorney General's suggestion, we amended the bill to provide for treble damages to injured litigants under Ohio's antitrust laws instead of double damages, which they now can get. Thus, the bill also conforms Ohio's antitrust laws to the federal antitrust laws in this respect as well. House Bill 126 is backed by the Ohio State Bar Association, by former chiefs of the Attorney General's antitrust section, and the Attorney General is satisfied that with the amendment she requested, this is a good bill. By enacting House Bill 126, we will do three things. One, bring procedural fairness to actions under the antitrust laws in Ohio. Two, bring Ohio into conformity with the laws of other states and the federal government. And three, provide injured persons with the same remedies that they can get under federal law for antitrust violations. I respectfully seek your support for House Bill 126. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question is, shall the bill pass? The House will prepare and proceed to vote on the bill. Have all members now voted? The clerk will take the roll. 97 affirmative votes, no negative votes. Therefore, the bill, having received the required constitutional majority, is hereby passed and entitled.
For those of you that were more inclined to restrict the discharge of fireworks than the bill that we all voted for months ago, you should be happy with that Senate amendment. So let's be the House that could. We are on the verge of getting a bill that the governor has promised us he will sign. The Senate sent us a strong, clear message, 26-5. Let's show them we are their equal and get this bill passed so we won't have to talk about fireworks anymore. 20 of those 21 have limited to concealed handguns. So in keeping with the mainstream of the states that have already done this, we said, well, let's then limit it to concealed handguns and leave for another day, another bill, another round of fundraising appeals, no doubt, for broadening it to include shivs, knives, swords, axes, crowbars. I call it the Antifa Amendment. We can debate that another day. So therefore, I would urge that if someone would make a motion to table, we should table the amendment.
Chair recognizes Representative Jones.
Mr. Speaker, I move to lay the amendment upon the table.
We've heard a lot about how we, the citizens of Ohio, are tired of having the politicians pick their voters rather than the voters pick their politicians. During all the public testimony, which I would remind everyone, we had far many more meetings and public opportunities for input this time around than we did 10 years ago when I was here. We heard all those voices. Some of the loudest were from the former chairman of the Ohio Democratic Party, who said that neither most of the Republican congressmen in Ohio nor most of the Republican members in this chamber could ever win an election but for gerrymandered districts. The whole problem is gerrymandered districts. He called us hacks. He called the former Justice of the Supreme Court a hack. He called Senator Huffman a hack. He called many of you hacks. Couldn't win without gerrymandered districts. But he and those that expressed that point of view never fessed up to an interesting fact. If it's all about gerrymandered districts, then tell me why the governor of Ohio is a Republican, the lieutenant governor of Ohio is a Republican, the Secretary of State of Ohio is a Republican, the Attorney General of Ohio is a Republican, the Treasurer of State is a Republican, the Auditor of State is a Republican. Is the whole state gerrymandered? Or have we become a red state? Perhaps those arguing for fairness might next propose a constitutional amendment that we somehow reach up and draw Detroit down into the state of Ohio to make it more fair, or to draw Pittsburgh over the Ohio River to make it more fair. But I'm sure the Democratic parties of Michigan and Pennsylvania would have something to say about that. We've heard a lot about the 13-2 map. 13-2 map, 13-2 map. Says who? Dave? Who's Dave? Predictions are predictions, and predictions often turn out to be wholly untrue. Let me give you Exhibit A. The state of Virginia, which voted for Joe Biden by over 10 points in last year's presidential election, and yet a scant couple weeks ago elected a Republican governor in something on the order of a 12 to 14 point reversal of fortunes. And while they were at it, they elected their first African-American lieutenant governor, Republican, and their first Latino attorney general, Republican. So all statewide offices to be elected in Virginia this past year turned on a dime, overcame a 10-point deficit, and are now Republicans. Exhibit B, the state of New Jersey, 16 points last year, victory for President Biden over Trump. And yet, the Democratic governor of New Jersey held on by a scant 2 points. Again, a 14-point reversal of fortune in 1 year. Exhibit C, just 2 days ago, Columbia, South Carolina, in a county that voted by Joe Biden in South Carolina by over 40 points last year. 4-0. Not 4, 4-0. Just elected their first Republican mayor on a 52 to 48% victory, their first Republican mayor in the city of Columbia in over 30 years. Now, how does Exhibits A, B, and C stack up against the so-called 13-2 map? Well, my expert here, Mr. Swearingen, tells me that in 9 of the 15 districts in the map before you today, the partisan index is 8% or less, something on the order of 54 to 46. And in 7 of the 15, it is 4% or less. Well, folks, the red wave is a-coming at you like a freight train. And we've seen it in Virginia, and we've seen it in New Jersey, and we see it in Columbia, South Carolina. And if we can overcome 10 points, 16 points, 40 points in 1 year, you can too. It certainly isn't because of bad leadership on the part of the Democratic Party. Mr. Pepper was chairman during all that time the Republicans won all those seats. Now, we've heard a lot about Hamilton County, and I feel compelled to talk about Hamilton County because I've lived in Hamilton County longer than anybody else in this room here today has lived in Hamilton County. And I can tell you that in my part of Hamilton County, we are pleased as punch to be allied with our great friends in Warren County, Representative Zeltwanger, Representative Lips, Senator Wilson. We all work together to get good capital projects for our region. We have a lot more in Green Township and Delhi Township, Harrison, Coleraine Township, Crosby Township, Whitewater Township. We got a lot more in common with the good folks of Deerfield Township and Mason and Springboro and some of those other, South Lebanon, Ronnie Mag. I remember all the great people from Warren County. So the idea that everybody in Hamilton County is mad is fiction. The Democrats are mad. And the Democrats are mad because it was their single-handed objective for these maps to create a map in which Congressman Shabbat would lose. those of you that talk about fair, impartial, honest, need to review the history of Congressman Shabbat. Congressman Shabbat defeated 2 incumbent congressmen over his career, Mann and Driehaus, 4 Cincinnati mayors over his career, Mann, Cranley, Qualls, and Piraval, 4. And in every one of his elections, it's always been within a whisker. He has had more competitive elections than anybody else in Ohio in Congress over the last 25 years. And guess what? The map before us today creates a district that, according to Dave or the eggheads at Princeton, favor Shabbat by a point or 2 at best. 1 or 2 points. 1 or 2 points. Is he calling us up? Oh, you're really hurting me. No, he's took on those tough fights for 25 years. He's going to take it on again. But he wasn't going to put up with the rigged map that the Democrats submitted. They're just mad because they haven't been able to beat him. And I have every reason to believe it'll be a spirited contest, and that we have in this map that we've proposed far more competitive districts than the Democrats did, with far fewer jurisdictional splits than the Democrats' map showed. We're doing what the city of Cincinnati always wanted. Shabbat had 75% of the city of Cincinnati before. Now he's got 100% of the city of Cincinnati. Instead of them doing somersaults and saying, well, you finally did what we wanted, no, they moved on to something else to complain about. There's been, in closing, folks, there's been enough hypocrisy around this whole issue to fill a Texas-sized outhouse. We drew maps that keep communities of interest together, because the best definition of what a community of interest is a city boundary, or a township boundary, or a county boundary. And as I said a minute ago, the maps we're about to vote on have fewer jurisdictional splits than any other map that was presented, and fewer jurisdictional splits than any map in the last 50 years. So we kept that community of interest together. We did a marvelous job of keeping communities of interest together. And to show you just how hypocritical this is, about 45 minutes ago on the little Twitter feed, I saw a Twitter from the Equal Districts, which is one of the allied liberal organizations that came down here and beat the drums for what they called fair maps. They said, these maps would give Republicans 80 to 87% of Ohio's seats in Congress, even though Republicans only win 55% of the vote. Stop cheating us. That's what they said. But when the State Redistricting Commission considered maps for the General Assembly a few weeks ago, they looked at the map submitted by the Democratic members of that commission, which would have taken the 7 House seats in Hamilton County, a county which lately votes 55% Democrat, 45% Republican, based on the results of DeWine versus his opponent and Trump versus Biden. 55% Democrat, but the Democratic maps submitted to the Redistricting Commission gave the Democrats 5, at least 5, of the 7 seats. 71% of the seats would go to Democrats in a county that votes 55% Democrat. Somehow that's not cheating, but what we're about to do is cheating. And one of the expert witnesses filed an affidavit on behalf of the people suing the Redistricting Commission in the Supreme Court. And in that affidavit, some professor whose name is Latner, I believe, said that the fair map for Hamilton County would be 6 Democrat seats and 1 Republican seat. 6 Democrat seats and 1 Republican seat. Guess what, folks? That's 86% of the seats in Hamilton County, a county that votes 55% Democrat. Oh, but that's fair. Fair, ladies and gentlemen, is in the eyes of the beholder. We have followed the Constitution. We have done our duty. We have listened to the people. Listening to them does not mean agreeing with them. We are prepared to forge ahead in eager anticipation of the election results in 2022. I urge a yes vote. This represented a lot of give and take, a lot of compromise, a lot of wrangling over seemingly innocuous words, but that's how it is with complex legislation. You have to be patient. And as Chief Dan George said in The Outlaw Josie Wales, you have to endeavor to persevere. So we have endeavored to persevere. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the old song goes, pour me another cup of coffee, because it is the best in the land. And I'll put a nickel in the jukebox and play that truck driving man. Vote yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I urge a no vote on the amendment. We have been quite clear and consistent that the primary will be on May 3rd. The bill that we passed at the end of 2020 makes it quite clear that only the General Assembly may determine the time, place, and manner of holding an election. No public official, no Secretary of State, no governor, no Supreme Court may alter our decision. We have been very clear that until it is absolutely impossible to hold an election on May 3rd, this side of the aisle is for an election on May 3rd. We are not for an election on June 28th or June 19th or July 4th or any other date. We want May 3rd, and that's where we are. And I understand your point, but we have not changed our mind. So let's vote no and go home. It is not true there was no public input. The trial lawyers brought in somebody that went on and on and on and on and on. This entire dispute, being late in the day, reminds me a little bit about the hokey pokey. You put your left foot in, you put your left foot out, you put your left foot in, and you shake it all about. So let me try to make it real simple for you. But our friends across the atrium would not do it. And they have now said adios amigos until November. I do not know what the answer is at this point. I rise once again to be comradely with our friends across the aisle over there and say, okay, we'll concur with your amendments to our bill. But folks, we better wake up to the fact that we are tired of playing second fiddle to your old guitar. If you are Sally Buckeye and you're driving down the street and a cop car comes flying down the street without lights or sirens and crashes into you, under current law, you get no relief because the city is sovereign immune, the cops are sovereign immune, and so you go to your uninsured motorist policy and say, well, at least can I collect under my underinsured, uninsured motorist policy? And in many cases, they say, no, you weren't hit by an uninsured motorist, you were hit by an immune motorist. So no soup for you. Now, I am a firm believer in statutes of limitations. As Mark Twain once said, the older I get, the more clearly I remember things that never happened, which is why I believe in statutes of limitations. And approached me when she was nearing the end of her service on the 11th District Court of Appeals and said, our district does not have the volume of cases that warrant the number of judges we have on this court. You really ought to talk about abolishing my position when I retire, because she was aged out. And you know what? We need a little more of that around here. We need to right-size our judiciary. We need to look at the volume of cases. We haven't looked at the judicial lines in 30 or 40 years, but it takes courage to say, hey, we're underworked in this court. We need fewer judges, not more judges. Following her service on the, and by the way, I ran that up the flagpole with Chief Justice O'Connor, and she wanted no part of it. So there you go. Who was the more courageous, Diane Grendel or Maureen O'Connor? I would say Diane Grendel. But I digress. When I think about Catherine Ingram, I think I could summarize Catherine Ingram in 2 words: passionately feisty. And you might wonder at first glance now, what in the world does Bill Seitz have in common with Catherine Ingram? My hair stays the same color from week to week. Hers does not. We differ on some important issues. She's never afraid to tell me that I'm wrong. I laugh about it because half the time when I talk to Catherine, she ends the conversation by punching me in the arm or punching me in the chest, and I'm thinking, gee, if I did that back to you, Catherine, I'd probably be in DV court somewhere. But it's all in good fun, and I appreciate your passionate feistiness. And dirty little secret, far and away the biggest amount of state capital money that has ever been spent in Hamilton County has been spent in Catherine Ingram's House District. So I feel a little bit like having helped her on that, because we share that common commitment to the economic development of our community and our whole community. And I think Catherine probably appreciates it, but because a couple of years ago she gave me this absolutely gorgeous ashtray. I guess in recognition of our work together on capital budgets and just for old time's sake. And I really do appreciate that, Catherine, but I feel a little bit like Mom and Dad went to Disney World and all I got was this T-shirt, but you know, hey, I like it. I like it. And we did work together on many important issues that affect our community and brought home a lot of bacon that have improved the entire quality of life for our entire community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tom tells me that he met me for the first time in 1978 or 79 at a SAE fraternity party up in Clifton. I must confess I don't remember that meeting. We don't know, as is so much the case with so many things in Ohio, simple things that you would think we would know. We don't know. But because we got no traction in this body from the other side of the aisle, as I predicted on day one with our bill, if you do not like this bill, if you are not willing to work with us on this bill, do not be surprised when at the end of the day you will get a bill that is much less to your liking. It is frankly less to my liking, but it is more to the liking of my Republican colleagues. And for that reason, I urge concurrence. Level F5 conviction expunged and get her gun rights back without having to pay a lawyer a princely sum and all of the fees and process attendant to a petition to restore your gun rights. So I would ask you to think about this, because I know this is Mr. Kaler's last swan song. The fat lady is singing somewhere in the opera, right? Okay? But he has really been trying to get this done for a long time. And it is a piece, not the total answer, perhaps, certainly not one that we could all agree on when we look at the extreme risk protection orders and all of that, which most of us don't agree with. But this is a modest step forward, in my opinion, and that is why I urge you to carefully consider how you vote on this bill.
Question is,
Let's get back into reality. I'm told that a majority of states require that all absent ballots be returned no later than Election Day itself. So giving 4 days after is more generous than most other states, number one. Number two, I had neglected to mention the photo ID provisions of the bill. They were added by the Senate. Those are good ideas. They poll at over 80%. And what we're doing is we're saying anyone who does not have a driver's license in Ohio can get a photo ID at the BMV, free, 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 free. And I don't know why that would be a problem. If it's free, free at last. So I don't buy that argument. And it's a very good addition to the bill that I had never opposed, and I told Senator Gavarone I never opposed it. I did tell her, you better take care of active military IDs. They took my advice. I did tell her, you better take care of the Amish and some of these people that are, for whatever reason, afraid to get their picture taken, and they took care of that in these Senate amendments too. So they took my advice there. So the photo ID is a great idea. I know you all don't like it. I don't know why. I think a photo ID is a much more secure form of identification than some utility statement that some college manufactures, which is probably fake, frankly, and a bank statement that may or may not be valid, frankly. And so let's have a photo ID if it's free. Why not? I can't believe that most people can go through life without a photo ID. And I would ask everybody in this room, how many times in the last week have you had to show your photo ID? You get on a plane, you got to show your photo ID. You go to the bank and the teller doesn't know who you are, you got to show your driver's license. You go to the store and you try to pay for a check and you buy a Christmas present at Target, where's your driver's license? You go to the hospital, you got to show some photo ID. And hell, they ask you 5 times over, is that really your name and date of birth? I don't know why they do that in the hospital, but they do. So this is all specious. This is all nonsense coming from the organized left that rightly or wrongly wants everybody to be able to vote and will serve you an Egg McMuffin, breakfast in bed, and bring your ballot to your house. Well, folks, it doesn't work that way. There is a certain amount of personal responsibility that's involved here. This bill strikes the appropriate balance. It could have been better had you worked with us, but you wouldn't, and you didn't, so here it is. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Back in the days when we had paper copies, we didn't have these problems, did we? But at any rate, substitute Senate Bill 288 is an omnibus criminal justice reform bill. The delays that we've suffered by reason of computers crashing make it ridiculous for me to try to go through every provision. Suffice it to say, it reflects outstanding work by my joint sponsor, Representative Golonsky, and myself, that it also reflects outstanding work by Senator Manning over in the Senate, outstanding cooperation by the prosecutors, the Judicial Conference, DRC, the Attorney General, and I guess that we'll do the Christmas motif again, and a partridge in a pear tree, because everybody was involved. And the judgment will be made by each of you as to where you stand on this amendment. But I will say to the final point, the bill we just passed damn near unanimously here, Senate Bill 288, offers an opportunity in the hypothetical that Representative Kaler presented for the young lady who stole an iPhone at age 18 and was charged with an F5 theft to have that expunged 10 years following the completion of her sentence, including any period of community control. So I would ask you to think about this, because I know this is Mr. Kaler's last swan song. The fat lady is singing somewhere in the opera, right? Okay? I join in my colleague and interrupt this proceeding to announce that at my request and with the Speaker's concurrence, we have arranged for donuts and coffee to be available in the members' lounge so we don't all kill ourselves on the way home.
The House will prepare to vote on the Senate amendments rather than the donuts and coffee.
Because this subject, as some of us know, has been around since Moses was in bulrushes. We are targeting our tax cut at those who would most benefit from it. That is a humane thing, and it's something we were able to agree on a bipartisan basis. Now, I know a completely flat tax is the holy grail for the members of my side of the aisle. We are making progress in search of the Holy Grail. And it is good progress. And it is progress we were able to make in a bipartisan way. I would ask everybody to think long and hard about voting against an income tax cut that benefits everybody in Ohio making $92,000 or less. And I will bet my bippy that is most of the people in each and every one of our 99 districts. So think about that. Now, I'm aware that there are an unprecedented number of amendments that have been submitted for floor consideration today. Unprecedented. But I will tell you this. A few years ago, Donald Rumsfeld wrote a book that was called Known and Unknown. It is known that we have the votes on the floor today for what has been presented by all those who have come before me. It is unknown whether we would have the votes on the floor today if some or all of these amendments are added. But it is also known that the effect of many of the amendments is to result in our passage, should we pass it, of an unbalanced budget. One amendment alone, which would resume indexing the income tax for inflation, one amendment alone would cost $550 million over the biennium. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, refresh your memory, we have voted to suspend indexing for inflation in the income tax code on at least 2 prior occasions, and most all of you voted for it. So this is nothing new or unprecedented. But I will tell you one thing. The quickest way to have everything in this budget that we all just worked so hard on, the quickest way to get it all thrown right in the shredder over there in the Senate is to submit an unbalanced budget. Because they will dismiss everything we did and said, well, these people can't even balance their books. So think about that. We all spent a few months over here working very hard to come up with something that we know a majority of us are willing to support today. Do you really want to risk throwing it all away by rolling the dice on a bunch of budget-busting amendments that could jeopardize passage of the bill today? I urge support for the bill as written. And I hate to have to do this, but I'm going to have to do this. Some people apparently do not understand the link between the lack of employment and the lack of housing for ex-offenders and the rate of recidivism, which means the rate at which people re-offend. So I have this paper, and I have all these footnotes, and I guess we're going to have to go through it a little bit. But here we go. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What he said, please vote yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I had not planned to speak, but since we've heard so many eloquent speeches that have gone on for so long, I guess my Taylor Swift tickets are going to go to waste. I can't get down there in time. So now you get to listen to me for a couple minutes. I'll just close with this. I've been here 23 years. It's always the same drill. The minority always says the glass is half empty. The majority always says the glass is half filled. We hear 20 or 30 speeches. Not one person out of the 99 of us has changed his or her mind about how you're going to vote, no matter how eloquent are the pitches. But I will say this after 23 years. I have never seen a budget where we have so much money. I was here when we had a budget when the rainy day fund was 89 cents. That was under Governor Strickland, by the way. And now we have a rainy day fund that will be $4 billion, which sounds like a lot, but that can disappear in a hurry. I have never seen a budget that has more money expended towards tax cuts. And some of those tax cuts I think are a little hokey, quite candidly. But the income tax cut is great and in furtherance of a long-standing goal that many of us, at least on this side of the aisle, have had for a long, long time. We have never had more money put behind increasing direct support payments to the people that do so many dirty jobs and now we have to pay them well over that magical $15 an hour in order to get them to stay there, so they're not taking jobs at Amazon, boxing up presents that get delivered to your door to be stolen by the porch pirates. And I have never seen a budget where, after all this record spending, record tax cuts, record investments in the young, in the old, and in the in-between, where we still got $700 million left over to spend in the fall, not counting the $4 billion in the rainy day fund. So I've heard it for 23 years. You say the glass is half empty. We say the glass is half full. I say debates don't change anybody's mind. Let's vote and get on with the show. I certainly agree that people should be entitled to buy an EV if they want to. But to be forced into doing so, which is the road on which our friends in California are traveling, would be a very, very bad idea. And for me, I want to preserve the option of good old-fashioned 87-proof gasoline. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today we have an opportunity to correct a very small piece of voter suppression that is being practiced by the state teachers' retirement system. What do I mean by that? Well, under current law, a rehired retirant from STRS is not eligible to run either for the active teacher slots on the STRS board or for the retired teacher slots on the STRS board. They are truly people without a country, even though they paid into STRS, retired with STRS, and are now back working in our schools throughout the state. They are voiceless. They cannot run. And we think that's unfair. So my fine co-sponsor and I came up with this bill to allow the rehired person to at least run for the retired seats on the STRS board. Originally, we had wanted to allow them to run for either retired or active because, frankly, they're both. But in response to concerns raised by the teachers' unions and by STRS itself, we decided to settle for this measure, which just lets them run for the retired seat. That is what we're doing. I hope that everyone will do our part for democracy by allowing our retired, rehired folks to have a voice on the board that governs their pensions. Thank you. But I'll tell you a few little vignettes about Stan, because you kind of get to know somebody by the personal interactions that you've had with him. And you know, back in the day, and Dan Troy, you probably remember this, back in the day, there was, over at the Galleria, the Vern Reif would be at one end of that bar, and Stanley Aronoff would be at the other end of the bar, and the people would shuffle back between the two, kissing the ring. But the good news is Stan and Vern, despite the fact they were completely different parties, were generally able to work something out and respected one another. Stanley had a great saying that I always thought was kind of funny. He said, "I'm a man of very firm principles, but my first principle is to be flexible." and I always like that because it gives you a pretty good lesson that around here you've got to kind of compromise. You've got to kind of be open to the voices and ideas of others, because all 99 of us have voices and ideas. You cannot come in as if you have a monopoly on the truth, and Stanley certainly never did. One of my favorite stories about him, it was that he always liked to have dinner with the lobbyists, but he always liked to say, "Let's have dinner at the Masonette." And for any of you who know Cincinnati history, the Masonette was a beautiful 5-star French restaurant in downtown Cincinnati. And people would say, "Well, Stan, why do you always like to go to the Masonette?" He said, "I hear better at the Masonette." So we've lost a great one. We've lost a true American. We've lost somebody that did so much for this state, somebody that exemplified great character, exemplified the proper balance between principle and pragmatism. And I, for one, will sorely miss that great, great Ohioan, Stanley J. Aronoff. Thank you. So we're glad to see you, and he really did a favor for us today because he and his wife just had their first child less than 2 weeks ago, and I was worried he was going to not show up for us, but he came anyway. So thank you very much, and go Bengals! And I'm sure she will serve as a tremendous Hamilton County auditor, but she has massive shoes to fill there, not only because of Bridget Kelly, who unfortunately was there for only a short period of time, but Bridget's predecessor, Dusty Rhodes, was there for probably 30 years. And Jessica, I don't know if you know this or not, but when Dusty announced that he was leaving and that Bridget was unfortunately going to pass away, Dusty came to me and said, "How would you like to be Hamilton County auditor?" And I said, "Well," I said, "that's really not my cup of tea, Dusty, so I'm not gonna do that." But they picked Jessica, and I'm sure she'll do a great job there. Now, I will say this: when she first got here, I didn't save it, and it's a good thing for you, Jessica, that I didn't. But during one of those long session days, she and Kristen Boggs made some TikTok video as they were dancing around the members' lounge, probably about 2 in the morning. It was, I thought, rather risque, but but maybe that's just me. So what we're trying to do here, folks, at least what we all should be trying to do, is ferret out the evil construct of foreign money on our elections. This is not a good thing. And I remember from 2016 to 2018, or thereabouts, we heard from the national Democrats, and who appointed a special prosecutor to look at this question rather than going through the Federal Elections Commission. All we heard for 3 years from Mueller and the gang was Russia, 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 Russia. Everybody was concerned about Russian influence in the 2016 presidential election. We are now concerned about other forms of foreign interference. It is a dangerous world out there. The Chinese are busy hacking our systems, doing everything they can to pollute the values of our children. They are not our friends, but this unique area where you're trying to trace money back through a labyrinthine chain requires the sort of investigatory tools that the Attorney General has and the county prosecutors do not have. The county prosecutors are fine people, but they have limited bandwidth for international investigations, and it would be a joke to say that they too do not have political ambitions and aspirations of their own. We have gone through this at the federal level. They had, how many, I've mentioned Mueller before. All right, so you want to turn it over to an independent prosecutor, independent like Jack Smith, independent like Mueller. Yeah, fine. We all know that they're not independent. We all know that they're on an orchestrated witch hunt to prevent the Republican candidate for president from being able to run. I am concerned that we act today to ban foreign money as conventionally defined with foreign nationals, and that if we do go beyond that, as this amendment would have us do, we are inviting the undoing of all of the otherwise good work that we are doing. We can always come back in lame duck or a subsequent session and revisit this question. But in my experience, and I've had a lot of experience, and I guess people don't think experience matters very much anymore, but that's okay. But in my experience, the General Assembly, whenever they try to push the envelope too hard and try to go swing for the fences, go for broke, hit the home run, whenever that happens, it generally blows up in our faces. Now, if the amendment passes, the amendment passes. I think it would be a mistake to pass the amendment today. I personally would not have a problem banning green card holders from contributions on the rationale advanced by my friend. But it is not Judge Seitz who makes that decision. It will ultimately be the judges of the federal, district, circuit, and Supreme Courts of this country. And many of them here in Ohio incline towards the liberal side of the spectrum. So if we want to get something done and have it be effective in time for the upcoming election, prudentially, we should leave the definition of foreign national alone. And therefore, I would urge that we table the amendment for the reasons stated. Because let's remember this, ladies and gentlemen, under foster care, when you're 18, you're out of the nest. Bye. Gone. They push you right out of the nest whether you are ready to fly or not, which only adds to the problems that these kids encounter. The issue with energy prices is, as all economists know, a simple function of supply and demand. The demand is going up and up and up. But the supply, through thermal baseload power generation and otherwise, has not kept pace with that sharp increase in demand. And when demand is high and supply is low, for example, we went from 21 coal plants in Ohio down to only 4 now. When demand is high, supply is low, prices go up. You don't have to be Milton Friedman to figure that out. And or you have scarcity and brownouts and blackouts. It's just a matter of economics. Utilities are capped in what they can spend, so they cannot just run the meter spending a lot of money on hoo-ha, not very effective programs, because we're capping what they can spend. No one will be required to buy a damn thing under this bill. What instead will happen is the utilities will make offers to folks for discounts on energy efficiency products. Now, I've heard the argument that, well, people can go buy those energy efficiency products now. Why do we need this bill? Well, when Mrs. McGillicuddy goes to Lowe's or Home Depot, she's not going to get the same deal on a smart thermostat as Duke Energy or AEP or Dayton Power and Light can get by the power of joint power buying. When they come to Home Depot or Lowe's and say, I've got 25,000 or 50,000 or 150,000 customers who have agreed to get a smart thermostat, I think Home Depot and Lowe's will give them a bigger discount on the product than Mrs. McGillicuddy could get on her own. I've also heard people say, well, wait a minute now. We've heard these smart meters cause cancer and will invade customers' privacy. There is not one word in this bill or in these programs that deal with smart meters. Smart thermostats are totally different. You program the thermostat so that when you're out of the house, the thermostat will be adjusted to reduce your energy usage. And we've targeted these programs when they roll out through the PUCO, which will audit them every year to make sure people are saving more money in the aggregate than they're spending. When we allow these programs to go forward, we have a special emphasis on programs for low-income residential homeowners. Why, you might say? Well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? We're all paying on our electric bill the bills of the low-income people that cannot pay all or any appreciable part of their electric bill. And so by focusing on making those poor folks' homes more efficient, we are all saving money that otherwise will be added to our bill to pay for what they can't buy and pay for. And I'm glad to work with my great co-sponsor, Representative Sweeney, and try to make this a bipartisan bill that is supported, by the way, by all of the Ohio utilities and by the entire environmental community. So for once in a way, we've got them all singing off the same song sheet. Just a few little facts for people to understand the facts. I circulated to you last evening a report from the chief economist at LSC, Russ Keller. And if you read it, you would see that his analysis is that this so-called lost distribution revenue might add 18 cents a month to the customer's bill in year one, going up to a maximum of 88 cents a month in year 5, and then it will reset and all of that will go away. What is lost distribution revenue? The utility, when they get their approval for their rates, is guaranteed a certain amount of money that they will collect to pay their expenses. And when they don't get that because of intervening events, they are entitled to get lost distribution revenue to true up for what they were previously authorized to get. The payment for the incentive is included within the $1.50. The utility does get some money for running the programs. After all, as they said in The Godfather, we're not communists, right? They're entitled to do some money for having run the programs, all right? The deferral that was referred to, that's nonsense. The deferral is simply, remember I said the utility is capped at what they can spend? And if more people sign up for the program than they thought, they're entitled to defer till the next year collection of the revenue because we capped them in the first year, and the more people that participate, the more money is saved. You do not have to read your electric bill to understand whether you can opt in or out. There will be 2 separate postcard notifications not part of your electric bill. And some people say, well, maybe the people can't read. But the same people who say they can't read 2 notices are the same ones that apparently know enough not to turn the lights on when you're cooking dinner and not to put the air conditioning on when you're doing this. And wait a minute, which is it? I'm a little confused. These programs are very good programs, and let me close with this. Your utility bill consists of a generation charge and a distribution charge. The generation charge is 2/3 of your bill. Generation charges, which the utilities don't make a nickel on because it's a straight pass-through, generation charges have gone up in the last couple years by 29%. If your utility bill is $100 a month, a 29 and 2/3 of that bill is generation, because that's what it is. That means there's been a 29% increase in what used to be $66, and 29% would be tacked onto that. And so you can see you're spending way more a month in increased wholesale price of electricity charges than you would even spend if you opted into the program for $1.50 a month. So the more we do nothing, the more the wholesale price of electricity is going to spike, because again, it's not rocket science. When demand is here and supply is here, you have a terrible problem and price goes up. And my favorite little thing in here, which is funny, I talk about people not knowing what the law is and applicable to your job. Believe it or not, it's still on the books that the township fiscal officer must keep a book of all of the marks and brands that are out there that have been put on cattle in your township. Back in the day, okay, they used to put the branding iron on them, and the township clerk had to keep track of that, so we know who's the double R Bar Ranch and who's the triple O Bar Ranch, and they don't have to do that anymore under this bill. I appreciate the fervor with which my friend from Cuyahoga County has put forth her amendment, but I will offer you 3 reasons why it is not a good amendment and should not be taken. First of all, the state of Ohio is not the funder of the 5 pension systems. It would set a terrible precedent for us to get into that business. We have never been in that business. We did the cities a heck of a favor way back when there were 464 different municipal police and fire pension systems, all of which were horribly mismanaged, and out of the goodness of our heart, we took them over and gave them 67 years to pay off the extraordinary extent to which they were in hock. We do not want to be in the business of being the first funders of our pension systems, because most assuredly the other 4 pension systems will be right behind them saying, well, fund the teachers too, and fund the OPERS too, and fund the patrol too, and all of our pension funds will end up being state funded, which is not a good idea. Second of all, the local government fund, as I'm sure some of the old timers around here know, Representative Troy, is a horrible, horrible fund in terms of the way in which it allocates the money among counties, townships, and cities. Any increase in the local government fund would continue to perpetuate grievous pain on the townships, who have grown tremendously in population over the last 30 years. Unfortunately, every time the LGF goes up, they get disadvantaged, and I would use a stronger word if we were not on television. So that's the second reason that's not a good idea. And then, of course, the third reason is we did cut the local government fund. We cut it in the first term of John Kasich's, in the first year of John Kasich's first term. We did that, all right? And there's no doubt we did. But I think folks forget that in the intervening 13 years or so, we have given the cities hundreds of millions of dollars, as my colleague from Hamilton County said, in police training money, in safety money. We have increased the amount of money we give them for infrastructure when we increase the amount of money that cities and townships and counties get out of the gas tax. We gave them more infrastructure money when we gave the cities, the counties, and the townships the ability to raise the local license plate fee to fund infrastructure. And we weren't done yet. We also gave at least some counties the right to get rid of the income tax locally and go with a sales tax, provided that a certain percentage of it was spent on infrastructure. And those measures alone in my county have produced over $400 million that they didn't have before to rebuild the Western Hills Viaduct. So this mantra that somehow we are going to pay forever for a decision that was made 13 years ago is just unfair. And I didn't even mention the dramatic reductions in the workers' compensation premiums that have been able to be delivered for not just our cities, our townships, and our counties, but also every private business in the state of Ohio, thanks to the excellent management that we have had of our BWC. So yes, the LGF was cut, but I would submit we have more than made it up to them over the intervening 13 years.
The chair recognizes Leader Seitz.
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to prove here today that I'm an equal opportunity opponent of last-minute amendments introduced in the heat of the moment on the floor. It is a bit of a leap, I'm sure, for some of our folks on the opposite side of the aisle to suddenly at one fell swoop on whatever time of day it is this afternoon, decide that we're getting rid of the whole DEI program without so much as any discussion whatsoever. That's kind of a little bit novel. Even though I might support it, if we had plenty of time to debate it. Third, this amendment has just surfaced, as far as I know today. Very few people that actively worked on this bill have been able to fully digest it. We do not know what the criteria are upon which the municipalities would be approved to get money from this tax, should we decide to divert it to this purpose. And that is another unknown as we sit here today. And then finally, I want everybody to know, and you know, this all happened at the very end of June, so most of you were not aware of how close we got between the House and the Senate on a massive bill that would have implemented the recreational marijuana voter initiative. We got very, very close. And we came up with a list, largely that the Senate indicated they were dead set to spend it on, of what they were going to spend this 10% tax money on. They were not proposing to spend a farthing of it on fulfilling pension obligations. They were proposing that an appreciable part of the money would be to the benefit of local governments for things like jail construction, police training at DPS, police training for the Attorney General, money for substance abuse prevention, money for suicide prevention, money for the Division of Marijuana Control to administer the fund, and 2% for poison control centers, which are getting an increase in calls as wider and wider use occurs of not just recreational and medicinal marijuana, but Delta-8 and some of the other derivatives of Delta-8. So that's what we were going to get ready to roll with. And you can't spend the same money twice, ladies and gentlemen. So the amendment before us would say, oh no, forget all that. Forget all that heavy negotiating that went on for about 50 hours in 1 week. Mr. Edwards knows that. Throw that out the window. We'll show bad faith to the Senate in what we were trying to work out on an amicable basis with them, and all of a sudden on the fly say, no, 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 we've changed our mind. We're going to spend the money on pension obligations. So I'm afraid I cannot support the amendment, and I have stated why I do not think it is well taken at this 11th hour. Thank you. While it remains a good bill, late this afternoon, the Senate passed it with not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4. I won't go through the alphabet, but they added 17 amendments. And I'm not saying they're bad amendments. I like my friends in the Senate. These are mostly not huge deals, but even the best of us need time to fully understand what they did. And therefore, I am asking that we do not concur tonight with those amendments so that we can understand better what they are really up to. I might add that the list we got from LSC, which listed 17 amendments, was not even complete because my staff noticed that there was one more provision of my bill that they took out that they didn't list on the 17 amendment list. So this is why we need to do our homework, dot our I's, cross our T's, make sure everything is tickety-boo before we rush forward. And I believe and have every confidence that if we can non-concur on this tonight, we can work out our differences between now and our next session via a conference committee, and I know we will be able to win some and lose some in the conference committee process, but I think we should give it a try. So I urge non-concurrence, and I can say my joint lead sponsor, Representative Hall, joins me in saying, let's not concur. Non-concurrence. Thank you. I contacted the Senate repeatedly today, as did the next speaker, your incoming majority leader, and got a clear and unequivocal statement from their policy director, from a member of their current leadership, and from the president himself, that we are not going to consider this bill at all if this amendment goes into it. So we've got two good gun bills, 58 and 148, that would go right down the toilet if we do this. And the reason why the Senate gave is pretty convincing to me. There is no companion bill over there. The Senate never considered this at all. They said they've had no caucus discussions on the bill. It hasn't been vetted by any of their policy staff. And for that reason, they did not want to accept this, essentially sight unseen. Now, there was a time, ladies and gentlemen, in my 24 years, and I'm afraid that time might be slipping away, when what the bill sponsor thought by way of amendment, and what the committee chairman thought by way of amendment, and when the other chamber thought by way of an amendment, those things mattered. I think they should still matter. And I think with just a little bit more craftsmanship, we can get this bill teed up for passage in the next General Assembly with only some very minor changes that, frankly, my good seatmate here and I have been urging for months to tighten up that language on interjurisdictional task force cooperation. It just needs, what, an additional 10 words maybe? Anyway, so that's my point of view on this amendment, and I salute the offeror of the amendment for his tenaciousness, but for the reasons given, I do not really think we should pass this amendment tonight.
The House will now bid farewell to Representative Seitz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it is bittersweet for me to say goodbye to a very, very long-standing friend. The first time I met the Honorable William Seitz was when I heard it's like the Druckers and the Haneys. It was at the Ohio Township Association convention, and the two of us were standing in the back because we came from large urban townships. And most of the townships are very rural and small, and they were talking about, do we need a CDL to do the snow plows? And we had a road department that removed our snow. So Bill and I started to talk. And we talked about the need to have a separation, distinction between large and small townships, because the ORC is very clear. If you're a township, unless it specifically states you can do something, you cannot. But when you have a township of 30, 40,000 people and a police department and a road department and a fire department and all those things, you need to be able to work in the gray like municipalities do. And so after a lot of discussion with the OTA, we formed CLOUT, Coalition of Large Ohio Urban Townships. And we began to go to the state and work on legislation. And then in 2000, we were elected to this wonderful body. I sat over there, where Mr. Kick is, and Bill sat over here on the aisle. And one of the best things I remember about Bill in one of his illustrious floor speeches is that he whipped out a cigarette. How many of you were here when he whipped out the cigarette? He didn't light it, but he was really animate about whatever he was talking about. We have been blessed for a decade, well, 2 decades, 24 years, with one of the most brilliant minds this legislature has ever seen. And I'm not saying this without facts. But let's give you a little bit of his background. In 2016, ranking of all 152 legislators published by the Columbus Monthly Magazine, Seitz was rated as the best speech maker, savviest, funniest, and most importantly, the most knowledgeable. Ask a lobbyist. This lobbyist will figure out where the speaker is and where the Senate president is. But most importantly, where's Seitz on the bill? They want to know what he thinks about a bill before they weigh in on it or not. How many of us legislators have gone to Bill Seitz to help us with issues that we might have on a bill? Help us get this thing better. What can we do to make it right? These are the things that we think about when we do legislation. Bill Seitz is a native of Cincinnati. There's actually a street up near Christ Hospital off of Sycamore that's named Seitz Street. If you own some property there, you might have some money. The property's going really well. But anyway, that's I believe, part of your family tree.
I don't think so.
You don't? Well, it should be. Bill, you need to own property there. Anyway, Bill Seitz, even though he's not Catholic, was very involved in the Catholic Church on the West Side. He was a member of the Cincinnati Board of Education, God help him. He was a member of the St. Antoninus Parish Education Commission. He served twice as Green Township trustee, where he served as president of the Hamilton County Township Association. And believe me, even today, he's never forgotten those local roots. He always, always, always believes the townships need to have a voice at the table. And for that, we will all be eternally grateful. In 2000, he served in the House of Representatives alongside of great people like Michelle Glass Schneider, Patty Clancy, etc. There is where he rose through the ranks. As a fiscal conservative, Seitz is a champion of government efficiency. While others in Columbus talk about reducing the size of state government, Bill Seitz has done that. Throughout his legislative career, Bill Seitz has been one of the most forefront of criminal and civil justice issues, even though sometimes we disagree on some of those. He's leading the effort to reform Ohio's criminal sentencing laws and eliminate the barriers to employment for many nonviolent offenders, which Seitz and I had an issue over a few years ago when I wasn't in there. You remember that, Bill? It was because it included masseuses in that. And if anybody's ever had a massage, have you ever had a massage? To this date, you haven't had a massage. Bill didn't
use the computer either.
God love him. Well, he's almost into the 19th century. But anyway, he believes in the ability to reform yourself and second chances. In 2014, he was named Southwest Ohio's best antitrust lawyers, and he's been consistently ranked as one of the top legislators, not just in Ohio, but in the country. I could go on and on and on about this fine public servant, but to me, he's been and will continue to be a friend. He's like my brother. And at times, I call him even today on issues outside of this body just to get what he thinks about something. Bill, I don't know what you're going to do in the rest of your life. You will be sorely missed around here, but I know you'll always be a friend and a champion of good government, second chances, and making townships great places to live, work, and raise a family. God bless you.
What do you say about Representative/Representor William J. Seitz III? What do you say about this fine gentleman? Well, I'll tell you, I'll start with he is a phenomenal legislator. He is an animated orator, but finally, he is just a dynamic litigator. And I got to tell you, he is my friend. But even more than that, you all, I got to tell you, he is my mentor. And see, we may not agree on everything, but I tell you, once we do agree, you might as well just give it to the governor. But he has truly been a mentor to me. I mean, he is the mentor's mentor. He is the leader's leader. And it has been the honor of my life watching you just lead, watching you just be. The way you are able to articulate your words and the bills that you are able to disseminate and how you're able to guide. I mean, it is just astonishing to watch. But one of the things I gotta say this, I am a daughter of a whole bunch of preachers, and what I'll say about him is that he has this anointing on him. I gotta be honest about this. There's this anointing on you that you have the ability to mentor people who may not even come directly in contact or in communication with you, because they're able to watch you, watch how you lead, watch how you engage with others, watch how you are able to be authentically yourself. See, y'all might not like it, y'all might not agree with it, but you cannot deny that this brother is a leader. You can't take it away from him. You can't run from it. You can't hide from it. This is who he is. And I got to tell you, the honor of my career is that God allowed us to unite, you and I, to come together to give people second chances. Those who needed to be rehabilitated, those who made up their mind that they wanted to do the right thing. Come hell or high water, we did what we were supposed to do for Ohioans. And every bill that comes in here, whether you think it's good, whether you think it's bad, it's got his imprint on it. And see, y'all might be happy to see him go. You say bye, but I tell you, we are at a loss because you're retiring. And so I'm going to cry. I am crying, but I honor you, sir. I might not always agree with you. I might not always think that what you're doing is right. But what I do believe is that you got my back. And so I appreciate you. And y'all might say this is a little far, but I love you, I honor you, and I thank God that he's allowed us to meet. So again, with that, I say thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative William J. Seitz.
I'm sorry, I got nothing. No, what a wonderful gift of words you have, and you certainly hit that one out of the park. When Bill talked to me a few weeks ago about possibly getting up and saying a few words, I was so terribly honored, but also as of 3:30 in the morning last night when I couldn't go back to sleep thinking about what am I going to forget to say. Oh my gosh, how do you sum up a career like Bill Seitz's? 24 years of service to the people of the state of Ohio in a matter of a few minutes. You can't. You just can't. The first thing I'd like to do is welcome his sons Brad and Andy. Would you please stand up, please, for a second? I think we have a few grandkids up there. You'd stand up as well. Bill's sister and her husband, he's very close to, please. And he's got a bunch of fraternity brothers up there as well. Welcome, all you folks. And Andy's wife, his daughter-in-law. I'm sorry, I didn't get that. You can please stand up and get some applause. If you're the daughter-in-law of Bill Seitz, you deserve it. This caught me by surprise, and it might catch you by surprise, but this is the very first time in 24 years Bill's family has been here to the State House. The very first time. And let them know this, you missed a whole lot. You really did. If you didn't think he was doing much these last 24 years, trust me. His name is etched in the revised code. They almost had changed it to the Seitz revised code of the state of Ohio because, trust me, on just about every subject, Bill has touched it, he has fixed it, he has improved it. There isn't many people in this room today that haven't reached out to Bill for an opinion, for a bit of advice. I know I'm always going to him and asking him, would you take a look at this, and he'll fix it, he'll make it right, he'll make it better. But over all the years, I heard it was said, our former Senate President that Bill and I served with, Keith Faber, said that everyone has to be in this building. We have to be 3 inches deep on just about every subject. And every once in a while, you have somebody that can go down a couple feet and be a specialist, be an education or something else. But it's only Bill Seitz that can go down 3 feet on every subject. He does the work to make sure he knows something before he votes on something. And if he can fix something, he'll fix it in a remarkable fashion. One of the most remarkable things to show his true leadership, I think this is historical, but he has served as majority leader in this building under 5 different speakers. Think about that, folks. Every speaker's got a different personality. Every speaker has a different set of who I want on my team. The 5 speakers wanted Bill Seitz on their team as the majority leader. Nobody else in Ohio history could never ever be able to say that. Going forward, I don't think that'll ever happen again because there is only one Bill Seitz. Some of the, Jeannie pointed out, some of the significant bills he's accomplished: tort reform, criminal sentencing reform, collateral sanctions reform, energy efficiency standards, a bunch of ALEC model bills that he was able to bring forward. When there's the expression either going to be a show horse or a workhorse, Billy Seitz is both. You've seen, and I'm going to tell you something, when he waves it, when he starts waving it, when he decides to get real low in his voice, he's got his way of delivering, but he says he does it in a purpose. Like over the years, and I've had the great pleasure of eyeballing it for 22 of those 24 years, he sometimes uses music. We were talking about a tax bill one day, and he brought up the Beatles, John, Paul, George, and Ringo, and he started expressing the words, I am the tax man, I am the tax man, and saying the verbiage from that song.
George, Paul, John, and Ringo. The Municipal League's new song. Let me tell you how it will be. There's 1 for you, 19 for me. 'Cause I'm the tax man. Yeah, I'm the tax man. Should 5% appear too small, be thankful I don't take it all. 'Cause I'm the tax man. Yeah, I'm the tax man.
There was another bill, I can't remember the bill, but at one point he broke into, baby, you ain't seen nothing yet. From Bachman Turner Overdrive, I think,
And like the old song by Bachman Turner Overdrive goes, baby, you ain't seen nothing yet.
But other than that, there was a time that I think Representative Skindle, I think you guys were kind of debating the merits of fracking during one General Assembly. And so he broke into, come listen to a story about a man named Jed, poor mountaineer, poorly barefoot, family fed. One day shooting at some food, up through the ground came a bubbling crude.
Come and listen to my story about a man named Jed. Poor mountaineer, barely kept his family fed. And then one day, while a shooting at some food, up through the ground come a bubbling crude. Oil, that is, black gold, Texas tea. Well, the first thing you know, old Jed's a millionaire. The kinfolk said, Jed, move away from there. Said, California is the place you ought to be, so they loaded up their truck and they moved to Beverly Hills, that is, swimming pools and movie stars.
And folks, how could you argue with that? I mean, the folks in Southeast Ohio, the folks, as he pointed out, had 2 nickels to rub together barely, now had a chance of the lottery ticket. And so he was a champion of that. But he used those things to kind of help make the point. He and I have this common ground about the Godfather, you know, and I found out we had the common ground because he quoted the Godfather so often in the years. There was one time quoting Don Barzini in the seat, after all, we are not communist, you know, that was, but in that same scene, Vito Corleone said, and that I will not forgive.
But, if anything should happen to my son Michael, this I do not forgive, and there will not be peace.
And so that and many other things. Sonny Corleone on the Causeway, we've been talking about tolls, talked about Slim Pickens and Blazing Saddles, with all these people riding towards it in the sand, one little poll booth, he made them all turn around, we got to go back and get a bunch of dimes, you know, but he's just been such a marvelous, you know, in talking to his staff, the words that come out from his staff are integrity, loyalty, charisma, and loyalty again. And if you've been Seitz, is the term I used. If you've worked for Bill Seitz, then and if you've lasted in Bill Seitz's office, you've been officially Seitzed. And if you take a look around Capitol Square and you see the former members of Bill Seitz's team, that same group of guys that threw a big gala party for him a couple days ago, they're all marvelous. They've truly been taught by the master. I don't know that the state of Ohio will ever see that. And there's many of you that don't know, Bill once had a big full mustache. He had a Joseph Stalin-like mustache. I mean, you know, and for many, many years, till 2015. So those of you post 2015 might not have known it, but he also used Joseph Stalin, you know, in some of his floor speeches. And so I think that might have been inspired by his mustache. But I remember the first time I saw him without it, it was just, you know, after seeing it for like 14 years, all of a sudden like, boo, you know, but the mustache was his trademark, you know, but there's just so many things that you can go on and on about, and not to try to belabor the point, it's been my greatest pleasure in this 22 years that I've had. It's like the Flying Walendas, you know, they always perform their acts, but all these acrobats always had a net, that in case they slipped and fell, they hit the net. Well, for folks, for 22 years, Bill Seitz has been my net. If I was going to make a mistake, or if I thought I had a good idea, maybe it wasn't going to be so good, Bill would catch it and make sure that I didn't do it. And so I'm hoping we're not going to miss him. I'm hoping someone smarter than we think is going to say, you know what, your 24 years of unbelievable institutional memory, because nobody has a better memory than Billy Seitz. I remember he said, I asked him a question, he goes, Tommy P., we voted that in 2006 already. And I was like, 2006? I don't know what I had for lunch yesterday, but his memory is incomparable. I'm sure his family understands that. You know, but I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, I've never served with a more prolific, a more caring, a more successful. When he wanted to get something done, he got it done. And folks, that's all our jobs. That's what we're all supposed to do. So ladies and gentlemen, I give you the incomparable, amazing Bill Seitz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I think befits Bill Seitz, I'm going to start with a little Shakespeare. He doth bestride the narrow world like a colossus, and we petty men walk under his huge legs and peep about to find ourselves dishonorable graves. Now, I'm certainly not suggesting that Bill Seitz meet the same fate as Caesar did just a few minutes later in the play. But we have a giant, a colossus among us, and today we are bidding him farewell. I heard about Bill Seitz before I met him. When I got elected, everyone in Cincinnati is like, "Whoo, you got to meet Bill Seitz. You got to go talk to Seitz. Have you talked to Seitz? Are you, what's he think about you? Does he know you? Has he heard of you?" And so eventually I thought, okay, I got to go meet this guy. The legend precedes him, certainly in Hamilton County. And true to form, as is his gracious way, with a totally new, unknown, elected legislator, he took the meeting. As I'm parking, he's finishing his last cigarette outside his office building. We go up to his office, and before I met him, I'd sort of also gotten some warnings about him, and mostly from Democrats, but also from Republicans. And the thing that everyone said was, don't ever think, no matter how late into the night or how many drinks anyone has had, he will remember what you say. So don't take that memory lightly, because his brain is recording. And that memory, that capacity to take in information and store it and keep it, is one of the many things that makes him such a treasure in this place. So we sat down to meet, and we talked about what I was interested in. He gave me advice on committees. He said, and in retrospect now, I'm thinking back to a comment he made, and I'm like, well, only Bill Seitz could say that. He said, what's the point of serving on finance? Only fools serve on the finance committee. So many meetings. Just wait till the end, and then you get everything you want in there. And I was like, oh, well, that sounds phenomenal. But I think I'll take the yeoman's route. And I mentioned I was interested in housing policy, and immediately he said, well, have you looked into these 6 bills from the last 4 General Assemblies, and have you thought about this? And I thought, no, I haven't, but wow, he must be the housing guy. I told one of the lobbyists in the housing space that I was working with Bill Seitz on housing things. He was helping me. He was like, Bill Seitz doesn't do housing. Doesn't know anything about that. I was like, well, he probably knows more about it than almost anyone else here, even though it's not his issue. And so then, pretty early on, I came to him with a wild idea. I said, Representative Seitz, we have a problem in our public schools. We've got low school attendance, chronic absenteeism. It's a huge problem all over the country, and we need to do something about it. And he was intrigued, and he said, okay, send me some stuff on it. So I thought, okay, he's a lawyer, I'm going to write him a memo. I wrote him a 4-page policy memo with research and citations and everything. And he takes it, reads it, marks it up, 1 million notes, sends it back. We go back and forth for weeks. Eventually we have lunch at Skyline where we're going over it, and he says, you know what, fine. This is where we made it. Let's do it. Let's try it. It's you might remember this, $2 million pilot to use financial incentives to boost school attendance. And neither of us thought that much of it. It's a small pilot in a few schools. But on the way to committee, he's driving up and he calls me. And if you've ever gotten one of these, Bill Seitz driving calls, they're sometimes a little colorful. And I won't share the exact language, but in the short version is he said, if we get any questions, you let me handle them. And I said, great, yeah, sure. And sure enough, we got a question, and you could see him, you can watch the video, he sort of warms up, steps up to the podium, and goes on what it has become and what became a viral, truly iconic Bill Seitz answer on the merits of cash.
We have tried just about everything else when it comes to chronic absenteeism and low graduation rates. So as Donald Trump once famously said, what do we have to lose? My 7th grade social studies teacher always told us in our class, always remember this, kids, money isn't everything, but it's way ahead of whatever's in second place. So we've tried pizza day, and we've tried playground hours, and we've tried all kind of foo-foo stuff. Doesn't seem to work.
So let us talk about the immediacy of a payment in cash. Cash is king, cold hard cash. In God we trust, all others pay cash, right? You catch more flies with honey than vinegar. That's what we're trying to do. The stick approach to compel attendance has not worked. And the other incentives that we've handed out, I guess, aren't a sufficiently good incentive to get people to change their behavior. Maybe the pizza's not as good as it should be. I don't know. But that's why we're doing this, and I would underscore, too, this is a pilot. We are trying to find out if this works. If it doesn't work, we won't continue it. And $1.5 million over 2 years on a K-12 education budget in this state, which is somewhere between $8 and $10 billion, as memory serves, is peanuts.
And at one point, he just says into there, cash is king. And I will tell you, that made the news in London. All right, that clip was in the Daily Mail. But that is who Bill Seitz is. He took them first meeting. He read the memo. He didn't just read the memo. He marked it up. His questions and concerns were deeply insightful on an issue he didn't know much about on the front end. And he was willing for weeks to engage in the argument with me, to teach me along the way, to point out flaws, to try and get to a place where we could do something productive on a critically important issue. And then, and to the show horse piece of this, when the time came, he stepped up and he knocked that question and all the others out of the park. And he was willing to fight for that idea. So he has the prodigious intellect, and he's funny as hell along the way. Some of these quotes from the Cincinnati Enquirer piece on him were already shared, but it's worth sharing some of them because I think they captured it well. Bill Seitz was a tireless advocate for legislation he supported and a brick wall against ideas he didn't. Served on the leadership team of 6 different speakers, so that's what they say. The Enquirer noting that is no small feat given the rough and tumble politics of the Ohio House of Representatives. What they don't say is that some of that rough and tumble actually emanated from Bill Seitz. And so in addition to being a statesman and a legislator and a fighter and a teacher, he has been a champion, particularly for Cincinnati and Hamilton County in Southwest Ohio. It's actually, and I have this conversation frequently with people in Cincinnati, it's a little scary to think that we won't have Bill Seitz to call on issues related to Cincinnati and Southwest Ohio. And I know, there's many of us here from that part of the state, and we will do our best to carry the mantle forward. But our part of the state is losing our greatest champion in this body for the last quarter century. And that has been it for big things like funding and the convention center and other major priorities and sales taxes and other things, but it's also small things. We had a group of Sisters of Nuns, of Sisters of Charity approach us they last year, and they wanted some help figuring out how to get a bill passed on helping poor people pay their sewer costs, which is not a priority of Representative Seitz's. Not that he has anything against it, but it's not something he's worked on. But he took the meeting, and just as much as it was for them, it was a lesson for me, because not only did he take the meeting, but he spent an hour helping these four older women understand exactly the best path to get this legislation across the finish line, step by step, who to call, what to say when you call, what to do to prep for the call. Honestly, this advice alone probably cost thousands of dollars to get from a lobbyist. And he just gave it to these women because they were from our community, they wanted help, and he had the help to give. And he's also been a champion, and I want to thank my colleague, Representative Humphrey, for bringing this up. He has been a champion for the concept that people deserve a second chance. We are not the worst thing we've ever done, and it holds not just our economy back, it holds our society back when we have the yoke of people's worst mistakes hang on them for the rest of their life. There are people who walk free today because of Bill Seitz. There are people who have jobs, who can provide for their families, who know they have a future, because Bill Seitz fought for them to have that future in this chamber. Representative Seitz, you are the kind of lawmaker they write stories about. Henry Clay, LBJ, your friend and mentor, Senator Schuring. That is the vein and the ilk that you are surrounded by. And your legacy, I think, is not just the bills you've worked on or everything you've touched. It's the idea that we can make it happen. We can do it. Whatever it is, whatever the thing is you want to work on, whatever the change you want to see, there is a path to get there. And I know that because Bill Seitz has shown that on 1,000 different issues. And you can get there with different people. You just have to work the issue and be committed to finding a solution to it. You have to be willing to have the argument. And not only to change other people's minds, but to have your mind changed. That takes a type of intellectual stature, a confidence in your values and your beliefs that would serve us all well to keep in mind that he has demonstrated for more than 2 decades. Because there's a lot more work to do to honor Bill Seitz's legacy. We need to do something about energy generation. I don't know if you've heard him mention it. We need to do something about making sure that we deal with record sealing and expungement through the GROW Act or minor marijuana misdemeanors or all the other things that are holding people back that he hasn't had the time to work on. We need to improve energy efficiency and the things that he has fought for. That is the legacy he's leaving to us, is that we can do those things and so much more. So I'm not great on cultural references, but I know, Representative Seitz, it's your thing. So I tried to find one that was fitting in a floor speech. So I'll close with a show that took place a little bit before I was born. In the final episode of MASH, Korean War is ending. And I apologize if I get these character names right. I've never heard of them before. But B.J. Honeycutt says to Hawkeye Pierce, "I'll miss you a lot. I can't imagine what this place would have been if I hadn't found you here." So Representative Seitz, thank you. Thank you for showing us the way. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate it. And I want to first congratulate the eloquent praise, probably undeserved and overly effusive, from my good friends Gene Schmidt and Tommy Patton and LaTanya Humphrey and Donnie Isaacson. Each of you, I am sorely in your debt for the beautiful remarks that you offered. Each one of you reminded me of things that I meant to say today. I was wondering what I would say here, and I said, well, a lot of the best lines have already been taken in song. I could do Roy Rogers, "Happy Trails to You Until We Meet Again." I could do Vera Lynn, "We'll Meet Again, don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day." We could do George Strait, "The Last Goodbye is the hardest one to say, and this is where the cowboy rides away." But then I also thought about that memorable line uttered by our friend Representative Jeff Smith way back in 2006, "More hose, more hose." And that wasn't a song, but it busted up the entire chapter, the entire thing. Donnie Isaacson talked about various pieces of legislation, and many of them, I championed and did not become law. I want you to know, though, Donnie, I'm working in conference committee today to get that discounted sewer rate proposition done as one of my last pieces of work to help those nice nuns and old people and poor people in our community that is suffering under the weight of EPA edicts that have caused sewer rates to escalate beyond belief in my county. So I appreciate that, and brings me to another comment here, that legislating, I think, as I reflect on it, is a lot like fishing. You might say, well, why? Well, they say it takes 1,000 casts before you catch one muskie. It's probably why I don't do much musky fishing. But like any other kind of fishing, you are throwing your line out there and you don't always catch a fish. Many, many times you throw it out there, you reel it back, nothing but the worm on the bottom of your lure again, on the bottom of your hook. So it's like fishing in that respect, but it's also like fishing in this respect. Sometimes you actually catch a fish, and that's a very satisfying occasion. And then it's also like fishing because sometimes you get a big fish on the line, you're reeling it in, and at the last moment, the line breaks and the fish gets away. That's like legislating, folks. How many of you have tried to get your bill done? A good day to think about that as we're closing out our session. Try to get your bill done. You're this close to the finish line and it falls apart. For some of you, you get this close to the finish line and you get over the finish line. And for others of you, you're still out there throwing the line in the water and wait till next year. I want to acknowledge some of the other folks that are here on my behalf today. Tommy P. did a great job memorializing my family, and like he said, I didn't bother bringing them up here for all the hoo-ha and hullabaloo and personal privileges and so forth and so on. But I said to my family, I said, well, you know, guys, this is, if you want to see your grandpa or your dad in the legislature, today's your last opportunity to do it. So they came up and appreciate it. My other daughter-in-law is teaching public school today, and two of my other grandchildren are in the school play and couldn't come. And then two of my other grandchildren are too little to come. Probably don't want to hear some of the words that will be said, not for children's hearing. But in addition to that, in addition to those folks that have been acknowledged, I have some friends up here that I have known since high school. Bonnie and Don Baumgarten are here on my behalf. And then I have a bunch of my fraternity brothers and some of their wives. I have Rick Pratt and his wife Gina, known him since college. I have Jack Johnston and his wife Janice, known him from college, and Janice from high school. I have Dan O'Donnell and Billy Palmer, fraternity brothers. We were all SAEs at UC and had a great time, along with the Linder boys were all in our fraternity, and Johnny Barrett was in our fraternity. It was a great time in college. It instilled in me a lot of libertarian thoughts, okay? Had a lot of fun there. And what was fun about SAE was, when I was there, about half the people were from Indian Hill, which, if you know anything about my area, that's where all the rich people live. And then the other half of the people were from Western Hills. That's where the regular old German middle-class people live. And so the line was, the Western Hills guys would, the Indian Hill guys would pledge the Western Hills guys to show them how to party. But the Western Hills guys would pledge the Indian Hill guys to pay for the party. Symbiosis. It worked out very, very nicely. Okay? So I want to acknowledge my deep appreciation for you all coming up. My neighbor, Steve Simendinger, of many long years standing, and a fishing buddy. We do go fishing in Lake Erie from time to time. So Steve is here, and my friends since grade school, Dr. Marshall McHenry and his wife Joyce are here. I appreciate all of that. And you guys were great to make the trip. Hope it was worth your while in some way. I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the wonderful staff that I've had, and you heard Tom talk about it. They have been wonderful people. I'm not going to list them all, or we'd be here past the witching hour. But a number of them are here, and they have all been some of my more recent staff members since I came back to the House. So I would like to acknowledge Stephen Nielsen, Rob Van Kirk, Jimmy Wolf, Beth Wanless is up there, and I see Alex Lapso up there, and I see Rob Van Kirk and his lovely wife Taylor. She didn't work for me, but I wish she did. Levi Gross and John Fauci, they're all here, and you guys were all great. Right, they were wonderful. And when I think about it, I have been here a long time. I've been under 6 different speakers and been on the leadership team of 6 speakers. John Husted, Larry Householder, Ryan Smith, Cliff Rosenberger, Bob Cupp, and now Speaker Stevens. And so it's a real honor to have served in their regimes. And I'm not going to get preachy with you today because I don't think that works, but I just want to emphasize one thing. You all sit there and you think, well, it'd be easy to be the speaker. That'd be an easy job. You just stand up there and bang your gavel around. Hey, look, it's a hard job. It's a hard job when you have 99 people, each with their own set of talents and opinions and ideas. Each one thinks that they know best what should be done, and the speaker is constantly trying to herd those cats and get to the magic number of 50. It's a lot more difficult than anybody thinks. Not to mention the fact that you are then in charge of the entire House employment scene, which includes a whole bunch of 20-something-year-old kids in their first job that are prone to do stupid things, and that's probably why I believe in second chances so much. But be that as it may, it is a very hard job, so I would urge all of you, think about it. And the place runs on consensus. You know, we had a fellow up here, a good friend of mine in years gone by, and he would always have a my way or the highway approach to legislation. And I said, well, Tom Brinkman is the only person in this chamber that gets his wish every day, because he says, my way or the highway, and the highway it is. I would like to acknowledge the wonderful people of the Legislative Service Commission. They actually get very little praise for the extraordinary amount of work that they do, and we overlook their contributions to our detriment. Many of them have come around in the waning days here and wished me well, and I certainly have wished them well as they approach retirement. And of course, the folks in our clerk's office, Brad, and you've been here about as long as me, and all the folks that work in the clerk's office. They just do a lot of work and keep the place buzzing and running on time. They're wonderful folks. I've served under 6 speakers. I've served with 7 Senate presidents. That would be Senator Finan, Senator White, Senator Harris, Senator Niehaus, Senator Faber, Senator Obhoff, and Senator Huffman, and under 4 governors: Governor Taft, Governor Strickland, Governor Kasich, Governor DeWine. It really is sort of a generation of important folks in Ohio politics, and it's been my privilege to serve with them. So I'm not going to go on very much longer. We've gone on a long, long time already, and you guys have been just great to listen so patiently. But I'm sure there are people in this chamber that are thinking that, well, maybe Seitz is going to go out like Jordan Belfort in The Wolf of Wall Street. I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving. The show goes on. They're going to need a wrecking ball and a SWAT team, call in the SWAT team, because I ain't going nowhere. Well, that might be what some people think I'm going to say and what I just said, but it's not true. We all have to leave. We all have to recognize when your time is up, your time is up. It didn't end so well for Jordan Belfort, so there's no point trying to prolong the agony. And I truly appreciate each one of you and the unique contributions and your friendships over all these years. And I see Representative Lear and others, and Representative Daniels, Representative Williams gave me an old-time candy cigarette, one for the ditch, right? So, and Angie King and Bill Romer and Adam Byrd. Anyway, thanks, guys. You're wonderful. I'll miss you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Speaker. And I want to say this. I neglected, my embarrassment, to notice my LA, Daniel Slaybaugh, this morning this afternoon when I gave my speech, and congratulated all my former aides, all of whom are wonderful, but none more wonderful than my current aide, Daniel Slaybaugh, who is right behind me right there, okay? Thank you. I cannot add to the eloquent words of my friends, Representative Swearingen, Representative Sweeney. The hour is late. I would only note that I came in to this body as a township person, and I'm very pleased to go out as the sponsor of the Township Omnibus Christmas Tree Bill. And Merry Christmas. Honestly, if you don't vote for it, something's wrong with you. And I'm not going to belabor it. If you have any questions, you can ask me later. But thank you all so much. It's been a joy serving with you, and I urge that we adopt this report.
The